Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. We have both Travis and Chris rejoining us here. I'm very excited to have you both, but while I am excited, y'all should be too. Make sure you like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff, get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section and we will engage those throughout the show. I don't have any here, which is surprising, but is what it is. Today, we're going to be talking about fostering perspective. And before we get into that, let's get some intros out of the way. Let's start with Chris. 10, 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good
Yeah,
stuff.
my name's Chris Lee. I got out of the Army a year and a half ago after spending 10 years in, had a blast, but I got out and wanted to start coaching, so that's what I do full time now. And it's been quite the adventure so far. A little different than jumping out of airplanes, but just as stressful.
I like it. I like it. Travis, what about yourself?
I am also a retired Army guy. I retired a little bit longer ago than Chris did, but I finished my military career and then I was contracting, security contracting for a while, and then had a couple of entrepreneurial adventures, and now I am back in school, so I'm a full-time student, and that's tougher than anything that you guys do. So, right on.
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta say, I love the beard with the mustache trimmed out. It almost looks
Yeah.
kind of Amish, which is fantastic. I love it. The now, so we're gonna be getting into fostering perspective as the topic of the day. So I'm just gonna define the concept of fostering something as well as perspective, and then we'll get into the rest of the conversation. So to foster means to bring up, nurture, to promote the growth and development of, to cultivate, to nourish or cherish. And then perspective is a view or vista, a mental view or outlook, or the appearance of objects in depth as perceived by normal binocular vision. So there's lots of ways we can go down this road, but let's start it off with some first thoughts. Travis, what are you thinking right now?
I really like the idea of like nurturing, like fostering, like developing a point of view, right? To try to get others to see things from a different point of view is kind of where I initially see this going, at least from my perspective, right? I think that a lot of our problems in the world could be solved if people could have more empathy and see things from other people's point of view and really understand what those points of view are. Then we could skip past a lot of the nonsense that we seem to occupy our time with and get to the meat and potatoes and like progress forward as a people. But I think we get mixed up in the drama too much, and a lot of that is because we don't really understand the perspective of whoever we're in a confrontation with, or having a debate with, or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, first thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Travis. And a skill that I'm still working on, but I'm trying to develop in my own life is the ability to entertain a thought without accepting it, or not necessarily having to accept it. I think that maybe that's just a fancy way of saying empathy, like looking at something through somebody else's lens, or pretending you've walked a mile in their shoes, like trying to figure out where they're coming from, because we are all approaching life and various circumstances through our own lens and through our own experience and history. And sometimes we forget that everybody else is the main character in their own story too. They're not supporting characters in our movie or our novel or whatever, but rather they're living their own main story as well. And being able to listen to and entertain thoughts that maybe I disagree with, I think is a skill that I'm still trying to work on and trying to develop in my own life.
Who told you that? I thought this was my story. This is the Chance Burles show, right? I thought that's what I was. Oh, I guess we're that's not how it works. Shaun, what are your first thoughts on this?
Well, the word has been said, looking through our lens, and we're all kind of doing literally that right now. And so the supporting characters that are in our life, or the people that are around us, or the world that we're being wrapped by, um, barely exists unless you're paying attention to the now of the moment. And so I'm looking at Trav, and he's got that wicked shaped beard going on right now. Looks rad, bro. And so there's no way I would know that unless I'd have seen him a little while ago, and I'd seen him a little while ago, and I'd seen him a little while ago, and I'd formed a pattern that helped me understand a little bit more about Trav and his this year, the Trav that I know. And I wouldn't know him even deeper if I hadn't have listened to his podcast on Behind the Shield with James Gearing. And so how much do I know about Trav without ever having shaken his hand? Maybe more than some people who have hung out with him for a long time, who haven't been looking through their lens carefully enough at Trav and forming the pattern. I'm a pattern guy. I form patterns in the world. And so now I'm looking at Chris. And from the first time that Chris came on the podcast, he's gone through several evolutions of his book collection behind him. How he's had his books stacked, how he's lit his books, how he's put out I was going to say the stage props, but they're not stage props. They're Chris's curious mind creating things that not only he's looking to see if it works, but he's a guy who evolves. He's an evolutionary curious fellow. And so it's not that I've carefully studied Chris, I carefully study the world. And so my perspective is created by how closely I pay attention to the patterns in the now. And so I feel I know both guys reasonably well, given that I've studied their nowness as every time that I've been looking through my lens at them through this lens. And so I think it's important that when we talk about perspective and fostering perspective, not to miss to me, the most critical point, and that is you can't foster anything unless you're in the game of paying attention and forming patterns.
That's a great point. Travis, I'm going to come back to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Shaun nailed it with the paying attention. Being able to pay attention and notice small things is super important when you're trying to put yourself into somebody else's shoes and look through their lens instead of yours, and try to see another piece of data that you might be missing because you're looking through your lens and not through theirs. Being able to have entertained an idea, without having an opinion, like Chris said, is super important. But I would add to that, just don't have an opinion. Like, your goal when you're listening is just to collect data. I'm not formulating an opinion at all. I just am listening and I'm paying attention and I'm observing so that someday I can form an opinion and I can understand what you're presenting, as through your lens. And then, through that, you gain trust with other people and, you can see things through their eyes and, everything is way nicer that way. And you tend not to just disregard people immediately when you're actually paying attention and you're actually listening. A lot of people nowadays have the problem of listening in order to make a reply or listening in order to disagree. Like, before they've even started to hear information at all, they already have an opinion. And again, that just causes a more lengthy debate, or people come at things the wrong way probably. And being able to just collect data and in order to formulate an opinion is much better than having an opinion when you're going into it.
Absolutely. Chris, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, both of you guys hit it on the head. The skill to be able to listen well is such a vital thing to learn. And like Travis was saying, oftentimes we're waiting for our turn to talk as opposed to actually listening. And pet peeve, I hate being interrupted because that means you're not listening. You're keying in on maybe a one word or one little phrase, and then you're immediately jumping into like your pre-programmed argument or whatever. And so something that I try to be rather diligent in with my own conversations is never interrupt somebody. Like, let them gather their thoughts, let them get all of their thoughts out, and then ask questions. Try to learn from other people, because I think you can learn anything. You can learn at least something from anybody. regardless of whether you agree with them or not.
Absolutely. Shaun, coming back to you. What are you thinking?
Well, I agree, Chris. Now, my struggle is this, that I'm a fast thinker. And it's not that I'm not competitively trying to outthink the person. It's just that I think fast. And while someone's forming up their thoughts and putting it out into a paragraph, in my mind, I've already written half a book in some instances. And I mean, it's not that's impressive or that's cool. It's just that that's the way I operate. And so my challenge is not with the panel currently. I'm talking about sometimes out in the world, some people just really think slow and talk slow, and I suppose I could learn something from that slow sort of thinking and speaking. Maybe it'll teach me patience. Maybe it'll teach me something. But in the moment, at that time, I struggle to not like, oh, bro, just pick up the pace. Can we get the sentence out a little faster? I appreciate I already know what you're gonna say. Can you just get to saying it? And so I do struggle with that. And again, maybe they're there in my life at that point to teach me some patience, but I do struggle with it. Do you guys struggle with that? I'm curious.
Oh yeah, that was actually going to be my question. Was how to manage those moments when either the person that you're speaking with is, or the person that you're listening to, either can't get the information out, or they're in the process of postulating their thoughts, or they're trying to put it all together, and you're kind of sitting there like, and like you're trying to be a good listener, you're trying to be there, you're trying to be present, but man, sometimes it is hard to it's hard to shield that from the other person at the same time. So let's hear what you guys' tools are for that. Chris, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Good question. I'll tell you what I struggle with. I don't mind if somebody is taking longer than maybe I would to gather their thoughts and get their thought out and articulate it. The part that I struggle with is when they've said their thought and then they circle back around and say it again in a different way and then do it one more time. It's like, all right, Roger that, got it the first time. I that's what I struggle with. But in regards to tools, it's I try to consciously, and we've mentioned this already. I try to consciously not just wait for my turn to talk, but actually listen to what it is that they're saying. Are they picking certain words on purpose, or is that just limited by their vocabulary? And then I could ask, well, what did you mean by this word, or what did you mean by this statement? Let's get kind of specific here, so we're on the same page, because the words I use, you might use the same words, but you might have different meanings in your head or different context behind it or around it. And so I think the closer that we can get as people having a conversation to get on the same page, the better. But no, I feel the struggle. I feel the pain when somebody's taking a hot minute to get their thoughts out.
So it is a struggle. Travis, what are you thinking?
It is, and that's probably ego driven by all of us. You know, we want to get our point across. You know, it is what it is. Looking back at life, you know, if there was some training in this in the military, I think we called it like course of action development, when whoever your team sergeant or team leadership would basically isolate different parts of the team, you know, and have each part of the team develop a plan for an operation, and then they would present that plan to the whole team, and then you would basically debate of it. And usually it would, as a team, you would pull the good parts, the best parts of every course of action, and then build a new one that would be ultimately the plan, you know. So it was really important during that presentation by the other teams that you paid attention, because you didn't want to look like the guy that just, no matter what was on his thing, you wanted to be the one that was pulling from everywhere, and you got the best of everything, you know, so that you could build ultimately the best plan. And if you frame your listening in that way, that like the point of my listening is so that I can gather every piece of data available, right? I want to know everything. I want to know everything that this person that's talking to me knows, so that I can have all the information and formulate a good thought, right? And if you frame it that way, then you're less concerned with getting your thoughts immediately out, because they're not finished yet, right? I'm still collecting information in order to formulate that thought. So I want it all, like, give it to me all. And then maybe you'll actively, like, kind of lean in and listen a little bit more intently than you might have if you were trying to get your word in, you know?
I like that. Shaun, you got any tools that you've used before?
Yeah, I do. And I use them every single day after we're finished the collective podcast. I've said it before that at the start of this year, when we do one every single day, I do two a day. So we do this live, and then later in the day, I'll re-listen to it. So out of the 340 live chat podcasts here on the collective, I've done 680 listens, as it were. And so when we first started off, to Chris's point, I was probably the guy who did that, who reiterated my point two or three different ways, because as I was actively speaking whatever was in my mind, I would be considering, am I putting it out across in the correct vector? Maybe I need to come at this from a different vector so that more people will understand what I'm trying to put down. And I came to realize through reviewing that I was actually reiterating my point two or three times. I was trying to get too crafty. I was trying to be too smart, we'll call it. And what I was doing was being dumb. I was taking away from my point by trying to be too crafty, by trying to hit it from too many vectors. And it was probably boring at the start of the podcast season this year, where I was just saying it too many different ways. So after much review, I got perspective on how to do it better. And so now I'm not coming at it from a whole bunch of different vectors for one single point. But here's the deal. That was me learning how I was doing it wrong by my own perspective. What I would have liked to have had is Chris at the start of the podcast year just saying, hey, you know what something that kind of chews me up a little bit is when someone tries to make their point 12 different ways, like you, Shaun. Hold me accountable. You know what I'm saying? And I would have been like, derp, yeah, you're right, bro. I've got to get to work on that. And so I think that there's a couple of different ways that you can get perspective. There is your own hard work, where you get to work on trying to figure out how to get better at something through your own internal perspective, through introspection or through reflection on the work that you put out there, the outcome that you're creating, and then measure that against the outcome that you're seeking. And then the second piece is just have some bro-hemos lined up alongside of you who will hold you freaking accountable, so that that perspective shift is from an externalized view now, where if you're not doing the work internally, the external work will help reinforce the internal work that you're not doing.
That is a great point. It was actually Seb gave me this little tool that I've been using the last little while. And to your point, Shaun, is the fact that having that outside perspective and have somebody be able to look at you and say completely objectively, non-emotionally, and say, hey, this is where you're screwing up. This is where you can do better. That is a fantastic tool to be able to utilize without taking it if you cannot take it personally. That is I think the key is that it's a negative thing, but it's not a negative thing. Seb told me at one point that he does this quite regularly when he's speaking with somebody, is he actually like actively reins in his brain. So in his own head, right? He'll be talking and he'll feel himself kind of drift, and he'll, okay, whoa, bring it back. Whoa, bring it back. And I've done it many times on the podcast. I've done it when I'm talking with other people. I find it really useful, but I didn't have that tool up until 6 months ago when he actually mentioned it on the show. And I was like, that is a great idea. It's something that we can pull from every conversation within the collective, is that every day we have these tools out there. You just got to figure out how to use them. So my question is, how do we take those pieces, those little tools, those things that the panel has now demonstrated that they've used, and utilize it within our own life without beating ourselves up of like, oh, I need to be able to listen better. How come I'm not listening so well? And utilize those tools without actually falling down that rabbit hole. Travis, what do you think?
I think if you recognize a problem and you deal with it, that's fine. That's exactly what you're supposed to do, right? You like, you know, case in point, Shaun had like perfectly like this, going back and listening to these podcasts, invaluable. Like I've done it myself, and actually, Chance, you caught me once, and this fits right into this discussion because I clued in on some point that someone made, and then I was pondering my response, right? And then as I'm sitting there in my own world, Chance like, Trav, what do you think? And I was like, you know, and I didn't know what you were talking about because I was just like thinking about my response, which is a problem. And I went back and I listened to the podcast again. At that exact moment, I knew exactly what I was doing. I was like, I was not listening to what the discussion was, you know? So, you know, stop trying to formulate a response, you know, like you can pick up on note. And if you have to make a note, that's cool. You know, write down whatever it was, but don't try right then to formulate a response, because then you stop actively listening, you know. And if you can have those, you know, it's just like a training video. If you're a weightlifter or a shooter or whatever, you know, you're watching tapes, you know, a football team watching tapes of themselves play, and you're like, oh, right there is, you know, and you can ID those problems that you have. It's just training, you know, it's just training for life and training to be a better person. And you know, that's simply all it is you're identifying a problem, and you're developing a course of action to fix it, and then you're executing that course of action, and then you reevaluate that, and if it didn't work, you'll try another one, you know.
Absolutely. Chris, you got any thoughts on this?
Probably not too many that are much different. I think everybody's hit it on point. It's like, first and foremost, what was brought up is having people around you that are able to stab you in the face and call you out on your stuff, and say, hey man, you're messing up here. You're not really paying attention. You're just waiting for your turn to talk. That's essentially an after action report after a mission or a training event. You know, you sit down, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? If you can do that on a personal level amongst friends or amongst people you trust, that's phenomenal. And then how I avoid beating myself up is I acknowledge, like, not every day is going to be perfect. Maybe that sounds cliche, but it was the best piece of advice I got at selection is, look, everybody's going to have a bad day. You're going to have a day that you don't measure up to the standard that you've set for yourself. The trick is to have more good days than bad days, and the accumulation of all those good days will progress you forward and move you forward. And I think maybe the last bit that kind of came to mind was when I'm engaging with somebody that maybe has a very differing opinion than mine, I try to authentically let them know that I actually care about them as a person, because then it's like two people talking and not two opposing ideas combating each other. And I found that has been actually really beneficial, that I genuinely care for you as a person. So yes, your opinion is way different than mine, but I still want you to be happy and healthy and successful, you know. And that kind of lowers those defenses, and it lowers that unguardedness. And then you can actually start to open up and dig into, like, all right, what did you actually mean by this? And what are your thoughts on that, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that in order to move away from that kind of beating yourself up, in the sense of, I'll use myself as the example. You know, I was reiterating my point on an iterative loop to try to make a single point a bunch of months ago. When I realized that that's what I was doing, I had to flippity flop my script and change it to, oh, you idiot, to, okay, cool, that was dumb. Now I'm just going to do it better. And so the moment that I just realized, let go of that mistake from the past and carve forward the future path of do it better, it makes things easier rather than clinging to that was such a major screw up. Just changing it to, oh, now I get the opportunity to go smash, to do a mega job. And so the trick for me, and maybe the trick for everyone, is to, in the present, in the now, recognize the mistake or the flaw or the less than ideal outcome, and simply refine your way forward to a better outcome. So rather than clinging to the negative, focus on the positive way to shape a more positive future.
I really like that. I wrote down a little bit ago, focus on the aggregate. And I think we've had, Chris, you've said it before. I think a number of people have said it before of making sure that you're concentrating on more good than bad. But there are times where you'll have a multiple bad things in a row. It's not always like, 3 good days and then a bad day and then 3 good days and a bad day. Sometimes it's 3 bad days in a row and you're waking up on your 4th and you're just like, oh God, here we go again. So the question I have in this is like, how do we stop ourselves from allowing that perspective of negativity from multiple hits to then engage the future with it? How do we remove ourselves from that moment and re-engage that as a new day or a new time or a new whatever? Like, you're on the mats and you're rolling and you lose, you get crushed and then you get smashed and then you get thrown around and then you're stepping up to this next person. And you're like, oh no, here we go. The purple belt's got the look on his face, right? How do we get rid of all that and engage that new experience from a clear perspective? Travis, what do you think?
Every event is in your life is an opportunity to win, or it's an opportunity to learn. That's it. It's that simple. And if you try to make it more complicated, you're just going to frustrate yourself. And I would say that you want to dwell on the negative, right? Because focusing on the positive is hard. It takes more effort to focus on the positive than to just reflect on the negative all the time. That's why negative ads sell so well, because it's easy for people to jump on those and just roll with the negative. But if you want to develop a positive outlook, you have to see the positive in every failure. Every failure is a lesson, right? Out of that, that whooping you took on the mats, you probably learned some things. Focus on those. Next time this happens, I'm not gonna fall for that. And when you see it, you probably see that move happening, right? You can see him trying to set it up and you're like, oh yeah, this is not going to work this time, bro. You're not going to get me again, and that's a positive from a negative that happened yesterday, so that is a chain of events that will occur throughout your life. You will learn lessons. And it just is what it is. Usually the best lessons, they kind of hurt a little bit, at least. There are a little bit of pain involved, whether that's just time or actual physical pain or whatever. But there's a little bit of something that makes that lesson stick. And that's good. That's how we develop and learn. I'm curious as what you guys think about how do you instill a different point of view in, like, maybe subordinates, like maybe you're a small unit leader in a company or in a team or whatever, and how do you get your subordinates to have a different point of view than their own, right? When you're trying to separate the team and you're developing different courses of action, what do you do in that leadership role to point your guys in a different direction, especially the ones that are laser focused on one violent approach? You know what I mean?
That is a great question. Chris, what are you thinking?
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm going to swing back around to it in a second. But to what I've done in my life to avoid that negativity kind of following me around like a storm cloud, if I've had, a string of bad days or maybe a string of bad weeks, I got to dial in my focus like super small. And so it's all right. So the last week has been miserable. Can the next 5 minutes be pretty good? What can I do in the next 5 minutes that is a win? And maybe it's in the gym. Maybe it's like I just haven't been lifting as well as I typically do. Okay, how about I dial it in? How about, can I just perfect my foot placement on this squat, or can I perfect my form as I'm going to the bottom end of the squat? And maybe that's all I need to focus on, is like, that's the positive, that's the win. And then I just accumulate a lot of those. That has helped me. I'm not sure if it'll help anybody else, but it stops me from focusing on the big picture, and I get really into the details and try to perfect those or try to make those better. Because then otherwise I just walk around all poopy face if I'm having a bad week. Now to Travis's question, how do I instill maybe a new perspective in subordinates or folks that are maybe junior to me on a team and that kind of thing? I think it first begins like, all right, where are they coming from? Why are they thinking the way they did? Where did they learn that? What experiences are they drawing from to make them aim in that direction? And then probably share why I aim a different direction and my perspective and my experiences that I'm drawing from, and why I'm thinking the way I do. Because some people play checkers, some people play chess, and if somebody's so used to playing checkers, like just one move ahead, and they haven't practiced thinking several moves down the line, maybe that's all that is like, all right, yes, in most instances, smashing down the door and storming the castle is the right answer. But have you thought about, the second and third order effects of that action? If you haven't done that in a while, let's practice that. That's why we're taking a different approach. That's typically how I would approach it.
I like that a lot. Shaun, what are you thinking on all this?
Well, I'm going to try to kill 3 birds with 1 stone, so just bear with me. I'm going to talk as I go back to the fridge here and grab some coffee and some milk to make my point. So here I go. So I just ran out of my coffee, and over here in Japan, I haven't had much success finding real good coffee around me. So I've been buying like 7-Eleven coffees and all that good stuff. And this is coming from a guy who has been a long time roaster, and I pursue world-class coffee. So it's kind of been a bit of a bummer. But in order to kind of get out of the bummer zone, what I do is I simply engage in my process. My process is this: I have a curious mind and I love to hunt. So the process for me is the hunt. It's less about the kill, it's about the hunt. And so when I'm like in a negative coffee space, I go on a hunt for better coffee. And so through an iterative process over here in Japan, what I've finally done today, this morning, is I've nailed what I feel to be like almost the ideal solution for me for the rest of our time here in Kyoto. But it took me a little while to figure it out. And so it went from suck to less suck to less suck until I'm now this morning with I'm pretty happy with that. And so here's the deal. What I've got is 2 products. This iced coffee here, it's a charcoal roasted coffee, believe it or not. It's pretty bad, but it's better than anything that I've been drinking up to now. But what really changed the game is this. Now, it's all in Japanese, so the only way I can buy stuff over here is using Google Translate. And so there's a feature on your camera where you can use Google Translate. You point your camera at the product, and it instantly translates through your camera Japanese into English. So I can't even tell you how many, not hundreds, but thousands of times I've used Google Translate feature to instantly translate every single product in front of me. The hunt, the process of finding something that is better than what I've got right now. So that relentless pursuit of excellence to translate the world in front of me that I don't really understand into a world that not only I understand, but I can actually start smashing in. So the real game changer was this milk. What it is there's 2,000 cows up in Tokaido, up on a northern plateau, that are pastured on grass. So this is a raw milk, 100% raw milk, with a better than 8.5% milk fat content. And they're Jersey cows from England. And so it's quite a rare solution, as it were, and it's quite an expensive milk. But this coffee isn't terribly expensive. The milk is kind of expensive, but both of these products combined are way cheaper than going out to any restaurant around the area and drinking bad coffee. And so I can tweak my ratios, which I'm going to do as soon as I'm finished talking, and create a good cup of coffee with freaking amazing milk. I mean, almost world-class milk to offset the less than world-class coffee, which pleases me because then I'm creating a custom solution that provides me happiness in the moment in context of what I enjoy as part of my morning routine, which is freaking mega coffee or world-class coffee. And so now to tie it all together, I've solved my coffee problem, quote unquote problem, by a relentless pursuit of excellence through a process, the hunt to do better. And that applies to the negative of anything. If you engage in a process to find micro wins and stack up on them until you get to a moment where, yeah, okay, I'm pretty pleased with this. Now, how can I keep making that better? Well, that works for me. And to the subordinates within any platoon or anyone that you're acting as a leader, as an example, any subordinates that are kind of stuck in that negative space, or they're kind of bummed out, for lack of a better term, and not really progressing forward, all you got to do is let them know, get in the game, get in the hunt, start hunting in the process. Find your process that allows you to stack micro wins that makes you feel like you're pursuing. And I think the pursuing part or the hunting part, that forward aggressive stance, that forward momentum, that is key to anyone who is going to do better in life.
Yeah, that is fantastic. We actually got Salty jumped in here. He said, identify those tiny ones, find that 1%, and break down the lesson in everything you do. Which I think is exactly what you were just saying. Really great point. Travis, what are your thoughts on those answers?
I kind of like on Shaun's last little comment there of like giving people direction and stuff. I think that's spot on accurate. And kind of what I was getting at with the question was like, how are you developing your team? Sometimes you just have to tell them, what they are now. At one point I worked at the first training phase after our selection course, right? So that the guys have already been through selection, they're all selected, and now they're going to be commandos. They start phase 2 is what it was called. Kind of my first in brief to those guys was like, now you're no longer who you once were. This is the point where now you become what you want to be, right? So you've identified what you want to be, and now you have to do what you have to do to be that, and that means that, you're the guy with the answers. You're the guy that can carry the load. You're the guy that's always on time. You're the guy that people lean on constantly. So if you view yourself as still a student, like in the unknowing way, like you don't have the answers and you're still working on it. If you see yourself that way, then that's what you are. You have to see yourself as the guy that everybody comes to for a lesson, the guy that will always have, what's needed. You have to be what you want to be, and you have to execute, do what you need to do to be that. Once you've made the decision, then do the work. It is it's kind of a little bit, philosophy-ish. I think, oh man, I can't remember which one of them actually said that. It's one of those old, Greek philosophers that said, identify what you want to be and then do what you must. It's true. See yourself as the winner. Like you're on top of the podium every time. That's what I am. I am a winner, and that's what I do. I have the answer. I'm the one that does it, and then you are that. And it takes work. But if you are that person, you understand that, and you do the work. That's why things are usually a lot more simple than we make them out to be, because it's easier to come up with an excuse than it is to do the work to be what you want.
That is 100% true. Chris, you got any points to add on to this?
I feel like anything I would say would just dumb everything down. That was spot on, Travis. Maybe just a quick anecdote. So I have a team now with my business, and they've been a lifesaver. But they're really good at stuff that I'm not good at, or don't particularly care for, like maybe the sales marketing, the video editing, and that type of thing. And so I have found that I'm I'm actually learning from them. I'm relying on them, leaning on them pretty heavily to be the subject matter experts in that particular realm. I still get to dictate the mission. I still get to say, hey, this is the direction we're headed. This is the standard that we're going to hold ourselves to. But you guys are the experts in that field, and so I'm gonna trust you to do your job well.
Yeah, absolutely. We got Vanessa Chaos jumped on here and said, "Living the dream, get legal raw milk there, Shaun. Sounds like you've refined the perfect Japanese coffee." Just 100% true. And this is a great point, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on this as well. Is that I was always seen as the facilitator within my friend group for many years in different avenues of my life. And I didn't realize that I was that person for a very long time until actually just recently when we started the collective and Shaun really pushed me to figure out why I'm here. And I was the guy that if anybody needed anything, they were like, "Hey man, what are we going to do tonight? Let's ask Chance. He'll have an idea." And I would always be that guy. And to the point that even when I was in training, people thought I was going to go into intelligence pretty quickly because anytime they had a question, I would pull up my phone and be like, "Oh, I know a guy. Hey man, what's up?" And like every time. Funny enough, I did eventually go into intelligence a little bit for a little while, but the point being is that a lot of people have the skills. They have this basic skill set that they could utilize through their whole life, but they never take the time to figure out that that's who they are. And so, I mean, Shaun has said it many times, sit down at a table, write down your why, how, and the velocity. What would you guys say to somebody that they've never taken the time to figure out who they are at their core, to develop that skill set that you guys are talking about? Chris, I'm going to come back to you. What do you think?
That's literally the first session with every single one of my clients is tell me the kind of person you want to become. And not just like generally speaking, but like specifically in 5 different areas. All right. And then when they start telling me all the things they want to achieve, I'm like, no, that's a goal. That's not an identity. Tell me the identity that you're striving for. And that when you picture yourself 5 years from now and everything is perfect, that's who you have embodied. And that's where I start every single coaching session when I first start with clients, because often I don't think how do I put this? I think too often we are reactive, and as a result, that becomes our identity. We are reacting to our environment, reacting to the people in our life, as opposed to being very proactive with the kind of person we want to be. And I think that's a significantly better option is figure out who you want to be. And as Travis said, start living that way, start acting like that person, and set boundaries around that. Make that your standard, your foundation on which everything else is built. And then your life is going to change shape pretty drastically, in my opinion.
Love that. Travis, thoughts on this?
Chris is right, and it's difficult sometimes to get the point across that the person who you are is not necessarily like the status that you've achieved in society per se. Like if you're a CEO of a company, or a sports star, or rich person, whatever that may be, I think a lot of people have trouble separating the achievement of a status position with actually what being a good person means to them, right? If you're not concerned with quote unquote being a good person, it's going to be probably a lot harder for you to achieve this status that you want, and that means different things for different people, but those two things are separate. Like status in society and actual character are not the same thing, and that it's hard to make people understand that sometimes, but it is the case. And starting off with especially life coaching or one-on-one stuff, like identifying what kind of person you want to be is really important.
Absolutely. Shaun, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the tricky part is that a lot of people don't sit down with that blank sheet of paper and a pen and write down their why, their how, and the velocity that they're going to apply. But let's pretend for a moment that 100 people out of 100 people today sit down with that blank sheet of paper and figure that piece out right now. Here's where the next failure point will be. They might figure out their why, their how, and their velocity, and then they'll start living in the future. And so to live in the future is where it all starts falling apart again. Because if you're scheming in the future, now you're living in the future, now you're thinking that you're something that you're currently not right now, that's where the work doesn't get done. You've got to figure out your why, your how, and your velocity, and then you've got to live in the present and be real with yourself all the time in the present. And if you can be real with yourself in the present, it will keep you honest. And by being honest with yourself and honest with those around you, then I think you'll find it gets a whole lot easier to understand who you are, and the people around you will get to better understand who you are. And then you'll get more honest feedback. And that internal honesty and that external honesty that you'll get will help really shape your trajectory in a better calibrated way. If you're lying to yourself because you're living in the future and you're presenting something that you're not, and your friends are or your surrounding elements are hearing the words that are untrue, and that's the read that they're getting on you and giving you feedback that is incorrect. Now you're being incorrect with yourself, and your externality feedback is also incorrect. It's hard to have a good calibration. So be honest with yourself in the now. Your surroundings will be honest with you, and you'll find that your calibration is a lot cleaner.
I really like that. Chris, you got any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, I thought that was spot on. I might steal most of that, if that's all right. But yeah, I tell folks that often as well. It's the individual that you're striving to be. Again, I have them imagine 5 years from now and everything is perfect. Tell me what that person looks like, character wise. As we build goals that are in alignment with that, I tell folks I work with often is like, all right, it's okay to periodically look up at that goal sheet for 5 years from now, or that in that identity sheet. That's good for course correction. But to Shaun's point, yeah, it's you have to focus on the 25-meter target, the thing that's got to happen right now, that's right in front of you. The small steps done consistently, accumulated over a long enough period, will get you to where you want to be. But yeah, you have to be present. You have to be right here, right now. Don't rush the process. Like every little step is moving you closer, and that's where you make your money. Is that daily, consistent, being present in the moment.
I like that a lot. Travis, thoughts? Anything to add?
That is definitely important. I'm still kind of thinking on it and how to break down the difference between living a life that you are kind of embodying what you want to be, and still understanding that it takes the work in order to be that. Like, I think for the people Shaun's talking about, that just like, they put on the team sergeant's, shirt one day and now I'm the team sergeant. That's not how it works. Like, you don't just get to put the shirt on and now you're the guy. You have to go through that learning phase, the progression to get there. But being the best and being present through that, and understanding that that this is part of who that ideal person is. That ideal person does the work. They take the time necessary, they do the reading, they do the physical preparation, they do all the things that get to that end state. There's no skipping any of those things, and that you're just kind of like, you're telling yourself a lie if you think you can just jump to the end. You can't just snap your fingers and then be a champion. The champions put in the work required to achieve that status. And I think that is a lot of a lot of, again, back in that separation, people don't understand like the personality, the characteristics that a person exhibits in order to achieve that status in the end. You know, they see the status and that's what they want. They just don't understand the time and the energy required to achieve that status.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember where I heard it. Somebody on the podcast brought it up and they were saying that it was like, it took me 15 years to become an overnight success. And I always thought that was such a great line because
Yeah.
it's 100% true that there's all that work and then all of a sudden everything works. And you're like, oh, now. And I'm going to try and thread a couple things together here that I want to get you guys' thoughts on. Earlier, Chris, you had said, you know, when trying to stay focused on a conversation, you can dive deeper into their thoughts, try to ask them questions. What did you mean by that? Where did that come from? Those kinds of things. And what clicked in my head in that is that requires presence of thought, a presence of of being. You have to be in that. You have to be completely present in that moment in order to engage that, to pick up on those little things. Go, hey, that maybe they don't see it my way or the same way that I understand that particular word. Shaun and I got into this with a title of diversely or diversely. And we got into this whole conversation just based off the fact of how I spelt it versus how he spelt it. So what my thought here is, could it be that in order to foster a better perspective, we then have to rein ourselves in to be more present in any one moment so that we foster a better perspective so that others can have the space to create their own perspective? What are you guys' thoughts on that? Travis, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Being active, I guess, actively engaged in the moment is very challenging. You know, it's like your mind will automatically start planning and formulating response or what have you, making a plan to deal with a situation. You know, it happens that quick, you know. And you know, Shaun's hit on it. You know, your mind works really fast, and sometimes it just takes practice to be able to identify what's going on in there so that you can stop it from happening and then re-engage in the active listening part. You know, it does take practice. It takes energy to actively pay attention to the surroundings, to the information that's being actively presented by someone or what have you. So it does take, you know, it takes a recognition of wanting to do that, right? Hey, I want to be a more active listener. And then you have to practice it. You know, you have to put into practice that what you want. So when you are having a discussion with somebody, really, really, really focus on what they're saying. You know, just decide beforehand, I'm not even going to try to formulate an opinion until you're finished speaking and presenting everything that you have for me. And then once you've heard everything, take a second to think about it and then formulate a response. You know, divide the steps up. You know, like, I've gathered it all, thinking about it. Now I'm formulating a response instead of being so active, you know, because your brain, if you let it, it'll run away. So you have to actively rein it in.
Love that. Chris, thoughts on this?
Yeah, that sounds very much like a meditative practice. That's how you practice it. I sitting still and trying to quiet my mind is so difficult, but it's when I'm sitting there and I'm focusing on my breath or body position or whatever. Dude, my thoughts go bananas and I chase them all over the place. But that is the practice. Once you recognize that, bring yourself back to the present, bring yourself back to the moment. And then when it happens again, you bring yourself back. That is the practice. And I used to beat myself up. I'm like, Chris, why can't you just clear your mind? Why can't you just sit still and empty your brain? Well, that's not really, I have found that's not really the intent behind my meditative practice. The meditation is actually just repetitions of reining in those thoughts. As you start chasing those rabbit holes, acknowledge it, gently bring yourself back. Don't beat yourself up, but rather bring yourself back to the moment. And that's, in my opinion, that's how you can practice if you're by yourself and not having a conversation with somebody. But the same principle applies when you're having a conversation with somebody. I'm thinking about the 10 things I got to do on my to-do list as I'm having a conversation with somebody. All right, bring myself back. What are they talking about? Or I'm starting to already formulate a response. Bring myself back. What are they actually saying? Let me actually hear them. That was my thought on that.
Yeah, I really like that. Shaun, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I love the active meditation, the in the now meditation without the sort of burning candles in the background and the namaste chants off to the side and the wind chimes and all of that good stuff. I mean, we can all actively meditate every single second of our waking day if we choose to. But that's the trick. It's whether we choose to or not. Now, I don't mind letting my thoughts run down several rabbit holes throughout the day because I love that, man. I also love that, and so I love letting my curious mind go out and hunt in the now. So I can be walking down a sidewalk here in Kyoto an hour and a half from now, surrounded by all of the bandwidth. And I can either absorb all that bandwidth or I can absorb most of it, but also then let my mind do rabbit hole stuff, which I also love. And I think that that goes back to I prefer a left and right of arc. I don't prefer this, just a simple linear path. We're all, well, I'm on my path, and I think we're all on our path, but our path should have ebbs and flows, and it should deviate, and it should have a left and right of arc. I don't want to constrain myself so much on such a tight laser focus that every single second of the day, I'm target locked on precisely what I'm supposed to be doing at that moment, because then I don't have any perspective. I don't have any contextuality on what I can and can't do. So I like to let my mind go all over the place, but I also like to get my namaste on and totally zen out as well. When I was up at Miyamoto Musashi's waterfall, standing there at that waterfall, absorbing it all, I was taking in the moment like at mega capacity. But then at the same time, and I spent quite a while up there, at the same time, I'd also let my mind ebb and flow across history and across all kinds of different spaces in order to understand what the moment that I was in meant to young Shaun, older Shaun, now Shaun, my friend, that other guy, this other person. Using the moments that we've got in the now is one dimensional if all we choose to do is hyperfixate on the perfect way to do something. By expanding the white noise of the moment to some degree, I think that we become more three-dimensional in the sense of the now. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, this is all bringing some really great thoughts to my head, and yeah, it reminds me of riding so much. In that, when you're on a horse, it has a mind of its own, but it has some training. So if it has a lot of training, great, you can do all kinds of cool things with it. If it doesn't have a lot of training, you're going to be fighting that thing pretty regularly throughout most of the day when you're working on it. But one of the things that we do on horseback when the horse gets distracted or it starts to not want to do what you tell it to is you run it in a circle. It's just a quick little, pull the reins and it does a quick little 360, reset, reorient. Oh, okay, well, now we're back here again. And then you can carry on. And I think that's such a great little tool that I'm going to be utilizing on my own self in the next little while is to give if you're getting out of line, if something is, if I'm getting out of line, let me put it this way. So if my brain starts to, beat myself up, or if I start getting too distracted or too into something else or down a rabbit hole that's too much, do a little 360, reset, reorient, re-engage, and then carry on. Now, we are just about at time here. So again, really great conversation, guys. This has been fantastic. And it went down a couple rabbit holes that I didn't think we were going to go down, but it was excellent. Any final thoughts on anything that we've gone over so far? Travis, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
This show seems like I've so many previous ones have come popping back up in my head. Like this comes back, like a lot of what I'm hearing Shaun talk about is, you know, wisdom. And we've talked about that previously. And that comes kind of with tenure, you know, and being exposed to all these things and learning what your bandwidth actually is, and being able to kind of pull the blinders back so you can see more of what's coming at you. You know, if you're on the path, but then you see another route to the same end, you're able to see it because the blinders are not covering your eyes, you know, and that comes with age, unfortunately. But then I think to myself, like, you know, it's kind of my responsibility to help the next generation know those things that it took me so long to learn. So I'm just going to tell you guys this stuff. So hopefully you have this lesson presented to you at a younger age and you can use it longer than I was able to, you know. It's just about learning, man. It's just about continuing to learn and continuing to better yourself every single day, learn more stuff, put that into action, execute, and just live life, man.
Love it. Love it. Chris, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we've talked about tonight has been skill sets that all of which can be learned and perfected. It just takes the practice, whether that's listening to somebody or focusing one's thoughts, or being able to project and anticipate the direction your life is headed and the kind of person you want to be. All of that is doable by anybody because it's just a skill that can be learned. But it does require you to be diligent and take the time to actually learn it.
Absolutely. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with the fellas. The seeking of wisdom and the ability for everyone to seek it is the truth. And at this point, it then becomes either drudgery or excitement. And I feel that some people start dreading the idea that they've now got homework to become better. Whereas if they could just flip that script into freaking awesome, bring it, that excitement to understand that tomorrow you're going to be kicking your yesterday's ass, that's a good thing, man. The excitement of becoming better, I think, needs to be heard more often, where people can like get out of bed and be stoked to become a better now. And the pursuit of excellence, rather than being drudgery homework, should be a excited hunt, an excited process that anyone can engage in.
Yeah, I could not agree more on that one. It has been a pleasure learning that actually over the last year. It really has. We're almost at a full year now, and it has been. I originally started thinking of all of this work as, oh man, I got so much work to do, and now I get excited when the show's about to start. I'm about to engage in this, and I get to have fun, and this is the fun part. But as soon as it's done, I'm like, okay, cool. Now I get to edit these clips, and then I get to make these things, and I get to put these out, and then I get to interact with comments, and I get like, it just carries on that excitement once you start seeing it as, when you have the perspective to see it as a larger concept rather than singularly, oh no, I have to edit another video. It is a piece in the puzzle of the larger concept, and took me a while to get that perspective, but I'm here, and it's awesome. So as I learn, I hope y'all are learning. As I am building in myself, I hope y'all are building too, because I know I'm growing every day, and I hope y'all are too, with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.